Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're cracking open a piece titled From Struggle to Undivided Inquiry by Kirsi Makinen.
Yeah, this is a really unique read. It's not like a how-to guide, but a really deeply personal journey. The author looks back on, 15 years of navigating struggle, finding transformation, realization even,
Yeah.
and, well, creating a whole new practice out of it all.
Exactly. She actually calls that starting point a struggle, but it sounds like it was the fertile ground for something she felt was, well, greater than herself.
Yeah.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the key learnings from that journey, maybe some universal principles she found, and this resulting system she calls Undivided Inquiry.
And it's a path that brings in some pretty intriguing concepts she introduces, doesn't it? Like shifting to an undivided relationship with your higher mind, stepping onto the path of a spiritual warrior of light, and how this whole process is, well, fundamentally about recreating your awareness and your embodiment.
Right. And she suggests that sticking with it can lead to some really profound places. Peace of mind, finding your spiritual home, deep meaning.
Maybe even a totally new direction for your work.
Yeah, exactly. So let's jump in and see what she found by diving right into that struggle.
Okay.
So the author, she frames this whole article as looking back at this intense 15-year period.
Right.
And she lands on a really powerful idea pretty much straight away. That recreating our awareness and how we show up physically, our embodiment, through personal transformation, that is how we unlock new potential.
And solve those big human questions. Authenticity, power, peace.
Where we belong spiritually, meaning, all of that.
Yeah. And what's really insightful, I think, is how she doesn't just see her personal struggle as like bad luck or something to get over.
Right.
But as the actual background that supported her growth. She talks about her underlying wisdom, her personality kind of acting as allies, alongside understanding, how development actually works and just practicing.
In everyday life. So that struggle wasn't the obstacle. It became the source material.
For her signature system.
Exactly, the source material.
And she gives this path a name, the path of a spiritual warrior of light. And based on her own, intense experience, she offers some guiding principles that feel incredibly relevant for pretty much anyone on a journey of deep personal work, I think.
Definitely. And the first one she highlights is kind of reframing seeking itself, seeing it as a form of medication.
Interesting. How so?
Well, she sees seeking, that natural orientation of the mind starts when we're kids. She sees that as the engine of curiosity, of development.
Oh, right.
It's that little seeker inside, always pushing outwards. And that leads to creation, innovation, new ideas, even totally new ways of seeing the world.
Wow. Think about that. Using your natural drive to look for things, not just to get stuff, but as a practice in itself.
Yeah. She says it keeps your intuition and imagination like humming, helps you discover all the different aspects of yourself. It sounds like actively parenting yourself, in a way. Appreciating who you are right now, but also getting genuinely curious about the hidden parts.
Which brings up a really important question, though, doesn't it? What about our deep human need for, safety, certainty?
Yeah, that's huge.
She acknowledges that, says it's crucial, but she argues that on this particular path, you repeatedly face that need and you transform it. You learn to receive safety and certainty, from yourself.
So it means letting go of those ingrained beliefs, those socially constructed memories, she calls them.
Exactly. The ones that shut down curiosity and push your authentic expression away.
She kind of flips the script on feeling incomplete, too.
What do you mean?
Well, instead of seeing it as a flaw, like something's wrong with you, she views it as just pure curiosity. The seeds for growth, guided by your inner vision.
Ah, okay. But it's not passive, right? It requires you to actively participate in your own development.
Yes. Seeing yourself as awareness, not just someone getting teachings dropped on them.
She also offers a practical tip, too, meditating on objects, especially if traditional emptiness meditation feels maybe too abstract or just difficult.
Right. Makes sense.
Her point is that concrete objects in your life, they have internal counterparts. So your reflection moves fluidly between what she calls outer vision.
Which is like your inner state shaping what you see outside, inside out.
Yeah, exactly. And inner vision, which is where external experiences get processed and understood internally. Outside in.
Okay.
And the practice, she says, is noticing the subtle space between those two perspectives and the awareness that arises right there in that betweenness.
Betweenness. That's interesting. And this leads her to offer a gentle critique of some spiritual practices, doesn't it?
It does. She feels some approaches might focus perhaps only on wholeness, oneness, or non-doing.
Sometimes implying that creation just sort of happens.
Yeah.
Without your conscious intention or participation.
Right. And her perspective is quite different. She agrees unifying processes do come together, but you absolutely need to practice them first.
So your intention isn't just ego, in her view.
No. She sees it as action. It is awareness observing itself, moving, transforming through developmental stages. She's really advocating for a more integrated approach.
Embracing the whole self, allowing your natural evolution to unfold wherever you are right now.
Yeah, accepting all of it and actively participating in that process.
Okay, so another really core part of the journey she describes is this often years-long process of understanding your unique calling. Your soul's purpose.
Right. And she's very honest that this frequently involves a lot of frustrating, trial and error loops.
Been there.
Haven't we all? But she sees those loops not as failures, but as essential learning experiences. Things your soul needs before it can really mature and step into its vocation as spirit.
And that vocation
isn't
necessarily your day job, right?
Not necessarily, no. It's that deeply fulfilling side of you that leads to a truly spiritually rich life.
She points out, though, that Western societies often struggle with this stuff, understanding or accepting deep spirituality, or maybe a more receptive, inward-focused approach to work.
We tend to prioritize that more, maybe masculine, ego-driven, fast-paced, action-oriented way of relating to the outer world, like it's the primary reality.
Or even the only reality.
Yeah. And this connects to her view that empirical Western science, while valuable, often only sees half the picture, the external observable bit.
Right. So from that perspective, it's hard to grasp interior development, or the necessary shadow work to expand awareness, true integration, wholeness.
Exactly. Your deepest calling, she says, lies beyond that purely external view. But working with your shadow, that's key to returning to the external world empowered.
Both for yourself and potentially to help others, too.
Right. And shadow work here means, exploring, understanding, integrating those hidden, unconscious, maybe disowned parts of yourself.
She uses this image of the spiral of consciousness, needing more depth, breadth, and height at later stages.
To effectively transmit deeper messages, yeah. She sees this as humanity learning how to raise awareness of a whole self-aware, new version of itself.
It's a powerful vision.
Yeah.
But she warns that current societal structures don't necessarily support this yet.
So those drawn to these deeper truths are serving a purpose they kind of need to courageously unfold themselves.
And committing to this soul's vocation, for the author, means creating something truly sacred, with intention, presence, deep reverence.
She frames this commitment as a test, because inevitably, difficulties, challenges, they will show up.
Yes, and she emphasizes that weathering those challenges, what she calls burning in that fire, requires immense self-trust and self-compassion.
That inner warrior nature arises precisely when problems appear.
And to navigate this fire, she strongly recommends dedicated practices.
Right. She suggests picking a few that cover different categories of development.
Like what?
Well, one for waking up, maybe something like Buddhist meditation focused on non-duality to build a solid traditional base. One for cleaning up, and this is where she really emphasizes Jungian background and shadow work. She sees that as going deeper than just therapy, specifically for raising awareness.
Right. Okay. And one for growing up.
Yeah, for growing up, she advises studying systemic theories of development. She mentions things like integral theory, stages.
Alongside maybe more archetypal systems, like astrology, gene keys, human design.
But then picking just 1 to 3 of those systemic ones to really focus on and go deep. She personally chose integral, stages, Roman Anger's work, Nish Dubashia's models.
Interesting how she differentiates, though, the systemic theories she studied deeply versus timeless systems like astrology, which were more like archetypal support for her own process.
Yeah, not something she felt called to offer as a service. And she really, really stresses the foundational importance of physical activities, just moving your body.
For embodiment, staying grounded through all this intense inner work. Makes sense. And she makes a crucial point here. The practices you commit to, the ones you focus on for several years, they become the very ground for your evolution.
They might even evolve into your primary practice, maybe even what you eventually feel called to share or teach.
This inner transformation, she says, it naturally leads you to inquire about teachers and then eventually maybe teaching yourself.
And it's not just about a potential career switch. She sees it as a structure of consciousness unfolding.
So this raises a fascinating question, doesn't it? Do you build your path using existing practices? Or do you, create your own system based on your unique experience?
And the author ultimately chose the latter, which led her to Undivided Inquiry, although she did start by applying developmental and Jungian theories.
But she eventually realized she was witnessing her own process awareness unfold and creating directly from that source.
Right, and her deep focus on shadow work was a major catalyst for developing her own approach, partly because she felt it just wasn't emphasized enough.
Even by established groups she was part of.
Yeah, apparently. She describes moments of being, pushed away or told that kind of deep shadow integration wasn't her job.
Wow. That must have been a pivotal moment.
Definitely. A choice point. Conform to the collective mindset or step away and unfold her own unique vision.
And that experience of not being fully understood or supported, it sounds like a common challenge on this kind of path.
Very common. But she strongly feels it pays off immensely for individuation, for expanding awareness. And that leads directly into how she describes Undivided Inquiry itself.
Right. She doesn't just call it a practice. She describes it as a full path, even a personal philosophy.
Yeah. At its heart, it's a wholeness practice. It functions like deep self-coaching.
Okay.
It's about actively witnessing new, maybe conflicting internal states, polarities, giving them names, feeling their impact.
Working through the resistance,
Right.
the shadows that get in the way.
Exactly. And integrating these different parts of yourself into larger, more encompassing perspectives.
And a key element she emphasizes is that this process is also about continuously observing and assessing your own development, both in the moment and over time.
Learning from your journey in that way, she says, is what leads to transforming your reality.
A central thread, right from the start of her path, was this intentional turning inwards, towards the shadows.
Learning to appreciate the unknown, becoming okay with not knowing exactly where she was going.
Essentially, learning to live with peace of mind within chaos, conflict, crisis.
Which she notes was kind of natural for her specific type, but maybe less common in development methods that primarily orient outwards.
Right. So her process, Undivided Inquiry, it intentionally brings in those elements of Jungian individuation.
Working with personal and collective shadows, resolving resistance, softening ego boundaries, all to help you live and lead from this state of process awareness.
And she feels this is particularly useful for individuals who want one core practice for their own deep evolution, one that stays adaptable as they grow.
Exactly. She suggests it feels most appropriate for those starting around maybe stage 4.5 in developmental terms, often characterized by questioning external structures, that growing desire to turn inwards.
She describes Undivided Inquiry using the metaphor of a mandala.
It's not a fixed set of absolute truths you just passively receive.
Right. It's more like a pointer towards potential outcomes, because the deepest truth is your own unique realization.
She sees it as an inner compass, a personal instrument designed for you to actively unite your inner and outer worldviews.
Becoming a kind of living meditation instrument that you learn to embody fully.
And that embodiment, according to her, is key. It makes you an exceptional problem solver for your own life, and it fuels this reality transformation she talks about.
The mandala reflects back what's happening internally.
Yeah. And as your capacity for witnessing evolves, you learn to intuitively predict patterns in your own experience. You can feel increasingly guided by your higher mind.
But first,
you often have to courageously work through the shadows that are setting boundaries to your inner light, your shine.
she describes reaching what might be considered later stages, maybe 5.5 or 6.0 in developmental models, where the sense of self just shifts profoundly.
Yeah. You're no longer just trying to unite separate parts and wholes. You begin to become the whole even when you're engaging with the tiniest part.
Wow.
The practice that initially unfolded the third dimension outwards through reflection, she says it completely changes direction. You internalize it all within you.
This is where she touches on some incredibly deep realizations, isn't it? Growing through the unconscious, the dreaming mind.
Integrating, transcending aspects of the self. She mentions that the experience of emptiness that can arise indicates you've navigated what some models call the fourth person realm from the unconscious side.
A space where emptiness and fullness somehow unite.
Yeah. It feels like a significant loop closing, maybe like completing a major phase of a hero's journey or a developmental stage or tier. Time itself can feel transcended.
The realization all is one and one is all might dawn.
Right. With the challenge then being to fully internalize it, live from it. At this point, she positions consciousness at the fourth dimension.
Noting there's still work to integrate the remaining thirdness aspects of familiar material reality within this new perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so this brings us to the section where she offers some really practical and actually quite pointed advice on choosing teachers, navigating the world of spiritual and developmental guides.
Definitely drawing heavily on her own experiences. And let's be honest, some mistakes she made.
She estimates that by around stage 5.5, you've probably developed enough discernment to recognize a potential teacher.
And potentially to act as a teacher yourself within certain limits. Before that point, she says, you might be more prone to placing maybe unquestioning trust in others.
And she's very candid about making errors herself, particularly influenced by her earlier background in traditional modern business.
Right. Her firm advice is that if your path isn't primarily about balancing this deep inner work within a corporate world,
your main teacher probably shouldn't come exclusively from that background.
Makes sense. And she issues a really strong caution. Don't just listen to your best friends or people whose advice seems driven more by their personal preferences, maybe their unexamined issues.
Than by genuine inquiry, no matter how charismatic they might seem.
Exactly. What works for or is preferred by your peer group might just not be the right fit for your unique path.
And she's crystal clear that external markers, financial success, public fame, conventional recognition, they aren't reliable indicators of a truly soulful teacher or guide.
Right. Those only show a certain level of external actualization, maybe supporting status. It's not that successful teachers are inherently bad.
But those factors alone are simply the wrong criteria for assessing deep inner wisdom.
Her strongest recommendation: seek out teachers with whom you can develop a relationship of mutual respect. Equality.
Someone who doesn't just teach at you, but is open to a collaborative exchange, learning from them and allowing them to learn from you.
She feels her most impactful teachers related to her as equals on a shared path.
She also advises doing your homework, inquiring about rumors, red flags within the development and spiritual teaching industry.
Some individuals might have problematic personal histories, unintegrated shadows, even if their work contains useful insights.
Her point isn't necessarily to dismiss their work entirely.
No, but crucially, to be aware and protect yourself. Don't put yourself in danger because of someone else's unintegrated issues or maybe your own weak spots.
Good advice. She suggests starting with one main guide initially and being absolutely willing to change if it turns out to be the wrong fit.
And perhaps most critically, she warns against being driven by ego and chasing concepts like enlightenment.
Ah, yes.
That pursuit, she says, very often leads to bypassing genuine inner work, and it can result in unhealthy patterns or behaviors before you even realize what's happening.
She offers a hopeful perspective on this, though.
She does. As humanity collectively begins to integrate its shadows, she believes every person dedicated to embodying this new humanity has the potential to become a teacher, guide, coach, leader.
Based solely on the path they themselves have navigated.
Right. She refers to many such individuals as wounded healers. Your capacity to guide others comes from the depth of the transformation and integration you've achieved internally.
Regardless of whether you have a traditional teaching background.
Exactly.
Okay, another fundamental principle she emphasizes is the commitment to living with integrity and wholeness.
Continuously aligning your inner state and your outer actions.
Which isn't easy. She says it requires significant discipline to build a conscious way of being. A character that doesn't get easily swayed or, drain energy on decisions that aren't sustainable for your true self.
And based on her 16 years of trial and error, she shares some common mistakes she made. Things she now advises others to avoid, if possible.
Like what?
Like impulsively leaving your job or workplace prematurely, especially at earlier stages like 4.0 or 5.0.
Without having a sustainable new source of income.
Right. Unless that specific path was clearly demanded by your deeper calling.
Or leaving a long-term partner, instead of recognizing that maybe the relationship itself could be a powerful context for mutual transformation.
Or moving geographically because you mistakenly think your internal issues are actually external problems that a change of scenery will magically solve.
She's adamant, isn't she? Real deep transformation happens within the crucible of your actual life situations and relationships.
Not by escaping them. Mastery, she says, is built through unwavering commitment, consistent practice, deep focus.
Present awareness, immense patience, active participation, and truly knowing your passion.
For her, Undivided Inquiry became that one thing, her consuming wholeness quest, she calls it, for years before she could even fully articulate or see what it was becoming.
And this intense focus and commitment, fueled by her creative passions, it gave birth not only to her own expanded awareness, but also to a tangible creation.
Undivided Inquiry itself, designed as an instrument to help facilitate that same kind of transformation for others.
She notes that this kind of deep commitment might last for years without you knowing the exact destination.
But along the way, you absolutely notice profound inner transformations. You see how your consciousness is taking shape in new ways.
You learn to deeply appreciate patience and the value of time. Not something to rush through, but as a necessary element serving your mission.
Yeah, and this is where she makes that really intriguing distinction between fate and destiny.
Right. She says some areas of life are simply fate, things you can't change.
But many others are destiny. And destiny is remarkable because it changes as you change.
Your inner transformation directly shapes your future path. That's a powerful thought.
It really is.
The author describes that as you commit to your path, live in greater alignment, listen more to your inner wisdom, your higher mind, those outcomes she mentioned start to show up organically.
That persistent fear you might have carried earlier begins to fade away.
The practice itself feels less like a chore, more timeless maybe.
Yeah, and you gain access to entirely new levels of potential awareness. She's very clear, though, she doesn't promise an easy life or a path free of pain or difficulty.
No easy button here.
Definitely not. But she says what you will find are these profound anchors. Deep peace of mind, a powerful return to your own inner authority.
Finding your true spiritual home, experiencing profound meaning.
And the very real possibility of a new career or direction emerging directly from the wisdom you gained on your unique journey.
She does give a heads up, though. This path increasingly takes you away from the conventional preferences, the priorities of modern Western society.
While it's possible to live in peace alongside that, the fundamental orientation of your life just shifts radically.
And yes, this depth of transformation demands significant mental strength, those warrior qualities she mentioned.
Because you might indeed find yourself losing friendships, leaving workplaces, seeing significant relationships change or end because they just no longer align with who you're becoming.
So by this point on the journey, she says, you've essentially recreated yourself multiple times over.
And the most incredible outcome, she feels, is that you possess your own awareness-based instrument, Undivided Inquiry, in her case, to use as your inner compass.
For navigating whatever comes next, and potentially sharing it with others, if that's part of your calling.
For her personally, Undivided Inquiry encompasses everything. It's a tool, a system, a method, a model, a practice, a path.
A coaching approach, her inner compass. And it holds the living memory of her entire 15-year journey.
It embodies the experiential wisdom that allows her to guide others who are called to this work.
She touches on the practical side, too, noting that external actualization, maybe monetization, depends on your individual ambition, circumstances.
Right. But the process itself, she says, allows you to truly know your whole potential, your innate abilities from the inside out.
A level of self-knowledge you just wouldn't gain without this kind of extensive, dedicated internal transformation.
It's not about waiting for the world to tell you what it needs, she says.
No. It's about responding to what you are already becoming aware of within yourself, your unique gift, your deep calling.
And she makes a crucial point here. The needs that the familiar outer world typically validates, they're often too small for these kinds of deep gifts. Meaning, because of that, you very often need to find a completely new context for your unique contribution to emerge.
A new context.
Interesting.
Finally, she reflects on how life can bring unexpected, even cataclysmic changes. Living in deep alignment with a deeper commitment, a sacred mission, and channeling your creative energy even amidst uncertainty. That helps build the internal resilience you need to navigate those situations.
Builds the capacity not just to act effectively in crises, but also to help others.
Yeah. And she notes that many of the most profound transformations are quiet, internal shifts, often visible only to those with the inner sensitivity to perceive them.
So your unique hero's journey might not be widely known or publicly celebrated.
Right. But those whose lives you genuinely touch, who you help find their way back to themselves, they'll recognize your contribution. They'll see your best interest as intertwined with theirs.
She ends by encouraging continuous inquiry and suggests that a truly mature inquiry, particularly around stage 5.0, can be distilled into a simple, powerful question asked repeatedly, both to yourself and others. What do you mean by that?
Simple but deep. Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive into from struggle to undivided inquiry, the core journey laid out is really one of navigating personal struggle, right?
Yeah, and embracing profound self-transformation, deep inquiry, and courageously integrating those challenging aspects like shadows and cultivating inner vision.
This entire process, according to the author, leads to a fundamental recreation of your awareness and a deeper, more integrated embodiment.
Culminating in the emergence of practices like undivided inquiry as, well, a way of life.
The article is pretty clear about the potential outcomes, too. Finding deep peace of mind, returning to your inherent power.
Discovering your spiritual home, finding meaning, possibly forging an entirely new career path.
While also being really forthright about the significant challenges, losing friends, maybe leaving workplaces.
Yeah, it's not sugar-coated.
No. So we've really explored the author's specific, intense experience and the system born from it. Undivided inquiry, viewing it as a potential awareness-based instrument, an essential inner compass for anyone navigating their own complex journey of transformation.
And here's that thought from the source to maybe sit with, something to ponder from that distinction the author makes.
Between fate and destiny.
Exactly. While certain areas of life might be simply fate, many others are destiny. And that destiny changes as you change. What does that distinction illuminate for your own path of transformation?
And really consider that idea that your unique gift might be so big, so true to you, that it actually requires finding a whole new context for it to flourish.
A context outside the familiar world's typical definitions and needs.
Lots to think about there.